Long before Hollywood knew their names, Clint Walker and Jack Elam were living completely different lives filled with struggle and hardship. Clint Walker grew up in Illinois during difficult economic times, and from a young age, he understood the value of hard work. He was much taller and stronger than most boys his age, which often made him stand out wherever he went. Before becoming an actor, Clint worked many hard labor jobs to survive. He spent time working on riverboats, in factories, and as a security guard. These jobs shaped his tough personality and gave him the quiet discipline that later became part of his famous screen image. Clint was not a man who talked much about emotions, but people who knew him often described him as loyal, calm, and dependable. While Clint was building his strength through physical work, Jack Elam was fighting a very different battle. As a child, Jack suffered a terrible accident during a Boy Scout activity that permanently damaged one of his eyes. The injury gave him the unusual appearance that later became famous in Western movies. Many people stare at him because of his wandering eye, and he often faced cruel comments while growing up. Instead of allowing the hardship to destroy his confidence, Jack developed a sharp sense of humor and a fearless personality. Before acting, he worked as an accountant, a job that seemed completely opposite from the rough outlaw characters he later played on screen. Fate slowly guided both men toward Hollywood during a time when Western films were becoming extremely popular across America. Even though they came from different backgrounds, both men understood struggle, rejection, and survival. That shared understanding became one of the strongest foundations of their friendship. When they finally crossed paths in the film industry, they quickly recognized something familiar in each other. Beneath the cowboy costumes and movie sets were two men who had endured difficult lives and carried emotional scars long before fame ever arrived. As the years passed, the friendship between Clint Walker and Jack Elam grew stronger in quiet and simple ways, not through public attention, but through small moments shared over time. They were not the type of friends who constantly appeared together in newspapers or talked about their bond in interviews. Instead, their connection lived in private respect. During long filming schedules on Western sets, both actors often found themselves waiting for hours between scenes. In those quiet gaps, they would talk about life outside Hollywood, sometimes sharing memories of difficult childhoods and the strange paths that brought them into acting. Clint, known for his calm personality, listened more than he spoke, but when he did speak, his words carried weight. Jack, on the other hand, used humor to lighten the mood, often making jokes about his villain roles and the strange characters he played on screen. Despite their differences in personality, there was a deep understanding between them that did not need constant explanation. Over time, they learned to trust each other in a world where trust was not always common. Hollywood in those decades was full of pressure, competition, and short-term friendships, but Clint and Jack seemed to move in a different direction. Their bond was built on shared discipline and mutual respect rather than fame or career benefit. Even when they were not working on the same films, they stayed aware of each other's careers and achievements. There was a quiet pride between them, the kind that does not need words. Clint respected Jack's ability to turn even small roles into memorable performances, while Jack admired Clint's steady rise as a leading Western star. Many people in the industry noticed that whenever their paths crossed, there was a natural ease in their interaction. They did not need to perform friendliness to the cameras. It simply existed between them. As time moved forward, both men aged within an industry that was slowly changing. Western films became less dominant, and new styles of entertainment began to take over Hollywood. Still, their friendship remained steady, shaped by history rather than trends. It was this long-standing bond that later made Jack Elam's final days so emotionally difficult for Clint Walker, setting the stage for one of the most debated and misunderstood moments in their shared story as the later years of their lives arrived. Both Clint Walker and Jack Elam began stepping away from the busy world of Hollywood. The film industry that once made them famous was no longer the same, and both men chose quieter lives away from constant attention. Clint preferred a peaceful routine, spending his time in nature and avoiding unnecessary public appearances. He had always valued health and discipline, and as he grew older, he focused even more on maintaining a calm and simple lifestyle. Jack, on the other hand, continued to enjoy conversations and occasional appearances in interviews, where he would often reflect on his long career in Western films. Even though their public presence became less frequent, their bond did not disappear. In fact, distance seemed to strengthen the respect they had built over decades. They did not meet often, but when they did, it felt natural, as if no time had passed at all. However, behind this calm surface, both men were dealing with the reality of aging and health concerns. Clint had experienced heart-related problems earlier in life, which made him more careful about stress and travel. Jack also began facing serious health challenges as his condition slowly worsened. These changes created an unspoken awareness between them that time was becoming limited. Still, neither man openly expressed fear or sadness about the future. Instead, they continued to focus on the present and the memories they had already created. Their friendship had always been based on respect rather than emotional dependence, so even silence between them felt meaningful. During this period, Clint often reflected on the idea of loyalty and what it truly meant to honor someone in life and in death. Jack, known for his direct and sometimes harsh honesty, also developed his own thoughts about how he wanted to be remembered. These quiet reflections would later become important, because they shaped the emotional decisions surrounding Jack's final days. The world outside continued to see them as Hollywood legends, but in reality, they were simply two aging men holding on to memories of a past that had already become history. In the final stage of his life, Jack Elam faced serious health problems that gradually weakened his body, and those close to him could clearly see that time was becoming short. His condition, especially related to his heart, made daily life difficult, and he spent more time in medical care and rest. During this period, he remained mentally strong and aware of everything happening around him. He did not show fear in the way many people might expect. Instead, he approached his final days with the kind of acceptance that came from a long and difficult life. At the same time, Clint Walker also understood how serious Jack's condition had become. Clint was no stranger to health struggles himself, especially with his own heart-related issues from earlier years. So he knew how fragile life could be. Even though they were not always physically close, the emotional connection between them remained strong. During one of the most sensitive moments, Jack reportedly expressed a personal wish that would later become the center of confusion and discussion. He did not want Clint to attend his funeral. This request was not made out of anger or separation, but rather from a deeply personal belief about how he wanted to be remembered. Jack wanted Clint to remember him in life, not in death, and preferred that their final memory together remain full of strength rather than sorrow. This placed Clint in a very difficult emotional position. He had to choose between public expectation and personal loyalty to his friend's final wish. For many people watching from the outside, the absence of Clint at the funeral created questions and assumptions. Some believed there had been a disagreement or distance between the two men, but the truth was far more personal and quiet. Clint chose to respect Jack's request, even though it meant facing misunderstanding from others. It was a decision based not on distance, but on respect for a friendship that had lasted many years. In his silence, Clint carried the weight of that choice privately, understanding that some promises are more meaningful when kept away from public attention. After the passing of Jack Elam, the absence of Clint Walker at the funeral quickly became a topic of public discussion, especially among fans who had followed both actors for decades. In Hollywood, where appearances at memorials are often seen as signs of respect, Clint's absence created confusion. Many people assumed there must have been a hidden disagreement or falling out between the two old friends. However, those who understood their relationship more deeply believed the situation was not about conflict at all, but about a private promise that Clint had made to honor Jack's final wish. Clint chose not to speak immediately to the media, preferring silence over explanation. This silence, however, allowed rumors to grow, and different versions of the story began to spread. Over time, Clint eventually addressed the situation in a simple and respectful way, explaining that his friendship with Jack was never defined by public appearances or ceremonies. Instead, it was defined by years of trust, shared experiences, and mutual understanding. He made it clear that he had chosen to respect Jack's personal request, even if others misunderstood it. For Clint, the decision was not about avoiding grief, but about honoring the way his friend wanted to be remembered. In the years that followed, Clint gradually stepped back from public life, appearing only occasionally in interviews or retrospective programs about classic Western films. During these appearances, he often spoke warmly about his time working in Hollywood and the people he had met along the way, including Jack. His words were always careful, respectful, and calm, reflecting the same personality he had carried throughout his life. He never turned the story into drama or conflict, which further showed the quiet nature of their bond. As time passed, public interest in the incident slowly faded. But among fans of classic Western cinema, the story remained a symbol of loyalty and personal honor. Both men were remembered not only for their film careers, but also for the emotional depth of their friendship, which had lasted through decades of change in the entertainment industry. In the later years of his life, Clint Walker lived far away from the busy Hollywood world that had once made him a household name. He chose a quiet lifestyle in California, where he spent most of his time in peace, away from cameras and public events. Unlike many celebrities who continue to stay in the spotlight, Clint preferred simplicity. He focused on his health, daily routines, and calm living. Friends and neighbors often described him as polite, reserved, and very disciplined. Even in old age, he carried the same strong presence that had made him famous in Western films. He did not seek attention, but people still recognized him when he appeared in public or in interviews. During occasional appearances in documentaries or television programs about classic Hollywood, Clint spoke carefully about his career. When asked about his past, he rarely focused on fame. Instead, he talked about the importance of respect, honesty, and loyalty. His reflections always showed that he valued relationships more than success. At times, he would mention his old co-stars, including Jack Elam, with quiet respect, avoiding any dramatic storytelling or emotional exaggeration. For Clint, those memories were personal, not something to turn into public entertainment. Meanwhile, the legacy of Jack Elam continued to grow among fans of Western cinema. His performances as villains and unusual characters remained highly memorable, and new generations discovered his work through old films and television reruns. Even though he was often cast as an outlaw, many people who worked with him remembered him as kind, funny, and professional. His unique appearance, which once caused him difficulty in childhood, eventually became his greatest strength in Hollywood. It gave him a career that lasted for decades and made him instantly recognizable on screen. As time moved forward, both men became symbols of a fading era in filmmaking, when Western movies dominated American entertainment. Their careers represented a time when storytelling was simple, characters were bold, and themes of loyalty and justice were central. Even though the industry changed, their work continued to be appreciated by audiences who loved classic cinema. The memory of their friendship, especially the story surrounding Jack's funeral and Clint's absence, remained part of Hollywood folklore. It was often discussed not as controversy, but as an example of personal loyalty and private understanding between two men who lived very different lives on screen, but shared a deep respect off screen. In the final chapter of their story, the lives of Clint Walker and Jack Elam came to represent more than just careers in Hollywood. They became part of the history of American Western cinema itself. Clint Walker passed away in May 2018 at the age of 90, leaving behind a legacy built on strong, silent roles that defined the ideal Western hero for many viewers. His death marked the end of an era, and many fans reflected on how rare his kind of screen presence had become in modern film. Even in his later years, Clint was remembered for his calm personality and his refusal to become involved in unnecessary public drama. When news of his passing spread, tributes highlighted not only his acting career, but also his reputation as a respectful and loyal individual. People who followed his life closely often recalled the emotional story connected to Jack Elam's funeral, seeing it as a symbol of Clint's personal values rather than controversy. Jack Elam, who had passed away years earlier, was also honored as one of the most distinctive character actors in Western history. His unusual appearance, sharp expressions, and natural acting style made him unforgettable in every role he played. Over time, audiences began to appreciate not just his villain characters, but also his comedic timing and versatility. Together, both men came to represent two different sides of the Western film world, Clint as a heroic figure and Jack as the unforgettable outlaw. But in real life, they shared mutual respect and friendship that went beyond their screen roles. Their story continued to be discussed in documentaries and retrospectives, not as a scandal, but as a quiet example of loyalty, personal choice, and emotional understanding. The decision Clint made regarding Jack's funeral remained one of the most talked about moments among fans of classic Hollywood, yet also reflected something deeper. The idea that friendship is not always defined by public gestures, but by private respect and silent promises. As time moved forward, their names stayed linked in the memory of Western film history, reminding audiences of an era when cinema was shaped by strong characters, simple stories, and deeply human connections behind the scenes. In the end, the story of Clint Walker and Jack Elam is remembered less for a single event and more for the meaning people attach to it. Over time, fans of classic Western films began to see their relationship as something deeper than ordinary Hollywood friendship. It became a symbol of loyalty, personal choice, and respect between two men who lived very different lives on screen, but shared a quiet understanding off-screen. Clint, known for his calm and heroic presence, and Jack, known for his wild and unusual characters, represented opposite sides of the Western world. Yet in real life, they found common ground in honesty and experience. The story surrounding Jack's funeral and Clint's absence continued to be discussed for years, but as more context was understood, it shifted from mystery to reflection. It showed how private decisions can easily be misunderstood when viewed through the lens of public expectation. Clint's choice, whether fully known or not, came from a place of loyalty rather than distance, and that idea